Good afternoon. I am Scott Nemeth, and I have the privilege of working on the McCain Institute's Global Leadership Initiatives. Through these initiatives, we seek to share Senator John McCain's legacy of character-driven leadership and serving causes greater than ourselves in order to help prepare today's leaders to meet tomorrow's challenges. Our flagship program, McCain Global Leaders, works to advance democracy, freedom, and human rights at home and abroad by supporting dozens of leaders in their journey as change makers. The leaders that we support represent a diverse set of backgrounds, and they operate in some of the world's most challenging places. They are journalists in former Soviet republics pushing back on Russian disinformation. They are doctors in Africa using innovative techniques to bring vital medical care to citizens living in conflict zones. They are policymakers in the Western Hemisphere, developing solutions to combat human trafficking and counter corruption. They are Afghans, Venezuelans, and Hong Kongers living in exile as they work to push back on violent extremism, outdated ideologies, and authoritarianism. And they are Ukrainians, defending their homeland and the principles of democracy against Putin's unjust and criminal invasion. Here at the Sedona Forum, we are joined by some of our McCain Global Leaders representing Iraq, Ukraine, and the United States. The McCain Institute is proud to stand with these leaders and support them in the incredible work they do around the world. These leaders share in Senator McCain's legacy of defending what is right and what is necessary, and they are in the arena just as he was. Our global leaders are greatly benefited by having the involvement and mentorship of 20 members of our Global Advisory Council, some of whom are here today. One of those members, Nate Mook, has been a vital asset to both the program and the McCain Institute. Whether it be with World Central Kitchen or the Howard G. Buffett Foundation, Nate's leadership, remarkable ability to tell compelling stories, and dedication to improving the lives of people around the world is an example to us all. Nate has spent much of the last year in Ukraine, traveling throughout the country and to the front lines of the war to provide critical humanitarian assistance. He is leading the way in innovating how critical assistance is delivered, with the goal of reaching those who need it most when they need it most in the most challenging of circumstances. Nate is a storyteller and a humanitarian, and we are so grateful for the work that he has done around the world. Please welcome Nate Mook.
Scott, thank you. Thank you, Scott. And I have the distinct pleasure of holding you before the alcohol, so I apologize and will try to be quick. It's kind of surreal to be standing here right now because 1 year ago, I was here on this stage discussing the humanitarian situation in Eastern Europe with Ambassador McCain, Senator Graham, and the amazing Josette Sheeran, who is with us this weekend. I actually remember speaking to General Milley at the dinner that we're going to have in just a little bit, and telling him that I believed that Putin was not going to stop until he took all of Donetsk, and specifically the city of Kramatorsk, which was heavily bombed last night. This is a photo from last night of my friends. This is Sophia, 14 years old, in their basement. And as you can see, this is what terror looks like. General Milley asked me who I thought was going to win the war. Ukraine, I told him. But the timeline depends upon us. And here we are, 1 year later. With the help of America and Europe, Ukraine is still fighting, barely hanging on to Bakhmut, just 30 kilometers outside of Kramatorsk. And the human cost has been tremendous. A generation being lost to this senseless invasion. I've spent much of the last 435 days in Ukraine, first with World Central Kitchen, the nonprofit that I ran for 5 years, which deployed $300 million between February and August, all in non-government funding. We immediately activated local resources on the ground, like restaurants, existing restaurants that were already there, putting people back to work, and enlisted 4,500 Ukrainian team members to deliver 200 million meals across the country. We built a logistics network that was larger than the United Nations in Ukraine. And this could never have been done if we were parachuting in foreign staff. Ukrainian volunteers are the heroes of this war, risking their lives every single day. I remember last year when I first arrived at the city of Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine. I met Sasha, who's here in green, and he grabbed my hand and put something in it. It was cold, it was metal, and I looked down, and it was a hand grenade. And he said, "Welcome to Kharkiv," and sort of let out this deep laugh. And I started laughing too. I was like, okay, this is a joke, this is funny, you know, ha ha ha, you know. But no, it was very real, and it was very explosive. And the laughing stopped. He said, "If we get taken by the Russians, pull the pin." It sort of snapped me back to the seriousness of the moment. What Sasha was saying as we were about to drive out to a village about a mile from the front line is that if we were to have been captured, we should blow ourselves up because the alternative was torture. Now, he was joking, making a joke, obviously, but this is the reality of so many that are delivering humanitarian aid on the front line in Ukraine. So now, as we shift from the emergency work to the long-term humanitarian assistance, as Scott said, I've been working with the Howard G. Buffett Foundation, which has donated over $300 million thus far in Ukraine. And while the bloody fighting rages in the south and eastern Ukraine, I'm not here tonight just to spread doom and gloom. There is progress that is being made. Farmers are planting again, thanks to seeds and farming equipment that's being provided. Instead of handing out meals at schools, we're building school kitchens. This one is in Bucha, which will serve 33 schools and kindergartens in the community, a central kitchen to provide fresh, healthy, nutritious meals. Instead of moving families from shelters to temporary housing, we can fix the windows in their homes so they can move back to where they came from. They want to be home. They don't want to be refugees. They don't want to be far away. And we've helped build a prosthetics center in Lviv called Superhumans. According to current estimates, over 10,000 Ukrainians have lost limbs in this last year war. The number is astronomical. I was just on Vokzalna Street in Bucha visiting my friend Bogdan, and you may remember this photo. It went pretty viral about a year ago after Bucha was liberated outside of Kyiv. This is the street today. I just took this photo. This was Bogdan's house. Bogdan has cerebral palsy, and he and his wife were at home when the explosion started. She, Bogdan's mom Luda, barely got him into the cellar in the house. His back was burned, but he was able to get underground, and they were stuck there trying to text family and friends to let them know they were there. When the Russians came into the house, she was screaming that she has a son, and thankfully they survived. But this is what was left of their house. And this is their house today, the one in the back. They're going to move back in June. So there's going to be a lot of discussion over the next couple of days on global security and the fight for democracy and freedom. And the idea that I wanted to share with you this evening is that humanitarian support is intertwined into these things. Supporting Ukraine isn't just with missiles and bullets. It's with meals, fixing windows, rebuilding streets, utilizing technology so people can get their pension in deoccupied territories, easing the burden on Ukraine, on the Ukrainian government, stabilizing the liberated cities and towns, and meeting the human needs of these communities. You know, Russia is trying to expand its influence through hard power. We expand our influence through soft power, and humanitarian aid is America's most effective form of soft power. But it's hard work and requires moving fast. Winning hearts and minds comes from caring for people in their darkest moments, not a day later, a week later, a month later. Look at what's happening in Sudan right now, where tens of thousands are waiting without food and water, trying to evacuate the country. Or just south of us, right here in Arizona, south of us at the US-Mexico border, where I've spent a lot of time. I think 1,500 US troops were deployed down there to help with the expected incoming surge. But there's been little discussion of the humanitarian support and reports that asylum seekers are eating leaves off of trees. Last year, when a huge earthquake rocked Afghanistan on the border with Pakistan, the area, because of the Taliban, because of the area near Pakistan, could not be easily accessed by international agencies. So what did we do? We were able to activate local teams already on the ground to cook in the region. And in Ukraine, the UN was slow in activating its humanitarian response, initially hoping that it would be able to establish a safe corridor between Poland and Ukraine. They were trying to pick one of the highways and negotiate with the Russian government that it wouldn't be bombed. Of course, that corridor never materialized, and it delayed a lot of action inside of the country. We can't always wait for security guarantees, and as we learn, there's no neutrality in conflict these days. Whether in Syria or Ukraine, Russia is happy to bomb humanitarian aid convoys or even murder journalists. We need to develop more effective methods for humanitarian response that are not delinked from our national security or military efforts, that don't solely rely on the goodwill of individuals or require waiting on donor governments. Sort of a rapid response force, if you will, that leverages the agility of the NGOs and the scale of the governments and the multilaterals. One that considers long-term sustainability for what happens after the donations run dry and the media moves on. So I just came back to the States after traveling pretty much the entirety of the front in Ukraine, from Kherson to Zaporizhia, to Donetsk, to Lugansk. And so I thought I would sort of close today by sharing a little bit about what I saw on the ground. So Kherson, which is in the south, was liberated in November, you may remember. And on the streets, there were these huge, huge, massive celebrations. The trains came back, rolling in from Kyiv and Lviv. Those trains were bombed 2 days ago. Kherson is under attack every single day, and unfortunately is now a ghost town. Once famous for its watermelons, this is what agriculture looks like in the Kherson region. Pretty much 100% of agriculture in Kherson is unusable at the moment because it has to be demined. I don't think you can see it in this photo, but they're in this field. There are these tank mines, and they get laid out, I assume, by a machine. They're in these straight lines. They estimated there were probably thousands of these mines, these both anti-personnel and anti-vehicle mines in this field. The Ukrainian government security, the State Emergency Services, which leads the demining efforts, said they got through about 500 of these mines in 2 months. So if you do the math on that, it's going to take a very long time. And if you can see how they're blowing them up, that's a rocket from an RPG rocket launcher that they hook to a plastic explosive, and then they run a long cable and they press a button and blow it up one at a time, at a time, at a time. Further east in Zaporizhia, in the towns of Orikhiv and Gulapole, families are still there living underground, about 4 kilometers from the Russian lines. And I saw the craziest thing when I was there. The Russians fired a missile that didn't contain a warhead, but it contained thousands of propaganda leaflets. Essentially, you can see this one basically claiming that the United States was causing this conflict and Ukrainians and Russians are brothers and they should be best friends and the US is at fault here. I don't think the Ukrainians were swayed because the rocket came in and destroyed this guy's farm, but a very, very strange approach. And this is how a lot of people are living, without electricity and water, cooking outside every single day with wood and on sort of makeshift camp stoves. There's incredible ingenuity going on, though. Ukraine is starting to manufacture its own drones, its own equipment. It's starting to manufacture its own even demining equipment. And it's pretty incredible the innovations that they're coming up internally. The individual, a friend of mine who used to run the Ukrainian railways, named Alexander Kamyshin, is now in charge of what's called the Ministry of Strategic Defense and essentially of strategic industries. And essentially they're charged with building support for Ukraine internally so it doesn't have to rely solely on Europe and the US. I went to go visit one of the HIMARS teams. This is HIMARS cats. I don't know if the cats come with the HIMARS, but They are amazing. Obviously, the HIMARS has been a game changer on the ground in being able to push back Russian positions. But they're also facing a lot of challenges. It's not so simple as they've got the equipment and everything is great. They're struggling with software updates and software mismatches. Changes to the software happens. They update the software and then they can't fire the rockets as far as they could fire them before, so they have to come up with new approaches. This is Vitalik, who used to run that HIMARS team. He stepped on a landmine on one of the missions and is now one of those 10,000 Ukrainians that needs prosthetics. But he's very eager to come back and keep defending his country and defending democracy and defending freedom in Europe and the world. I went out to visit the 92nd Brigade. So this brigade is the one that helped retake the area around Kyiv and also around Kharkiv. And the commander there told me they have a lot of ammunition, thanks to us. I mean, thanks to us in Europe, and they have in NATO, they have a lot of ammunition. The problem, he said, is that this ammunition only goes 14 kilometers. And the Russians have ammunition that goes 28 kilometers, which means they have to go into positions that are much closer to the front and put their teams in danger. He told me that he thought the winner of this war was going to be the one with the longest range, so it could stay sort of this cat and mouse of going back and forth. This is artillery warfare, but with drones. It's kind of incredible to see in action. There's been a lot of press coverage about this, about the use of drones, but it's amazing to see in action how they coordinate this. And many of the drones are supplied by volunteers. Thousands and thousands of them are brought in because they get lost and they get jammed, and so they get lost all the time. But really, that combination is what is keeping Ukraine holding the front line. This is a drone team that's just outside of Bakhmut, and you can just see the level of devastation that is all along the front. It's brutal. It's a brutal, brutal, brutal war. And I went to go visit, I ended up visiting one of the cannon teams. This is the 777 howitzer that the US provided. It's amazing. I mean, it's what they've been able to do, again, incredible. But out of 13 howitzers, only 6 of them were functional because they're firing so much artillery, it starts to wear down the barrel. And it's not like it's very easy to get it replaced because they don't have the supply chain. So they're struggling. And some of the challenges around ammunition that doesn't fire or batteries that are out on some of the GPS targeting. So despite all of this, though, it's amazing what progress is being made. This is Saltivka in Kharkiv. This is a neighborhood on the edge of the city of Kharkiv. It's home to, I think, between 200 and 300,000 people. It's one of the largest, densest communities in all of Europe. And it was also the front line for a lot of fighting in Ukraine for a very long time as Ukrainians held the line in Kharkiv. And I went back on this last trip, and they are slowly but surely starting to rebuild. You see the crane here. They're starting to fix up. They're starting to patch windows. Some of the buildings will have to be brought down, but some of them they're trying to get back up and running, and people are trying to get back in, which is heartening, right? Because despite everything, life is going on, and they are moving forward. So, as we head off to the reception and dinner, I just wanted to leave you with something that President Zelensky said that really stuck with me. And as we think about our next steps, both on the humanitarian side, on all fronts, as we work to help Ukraine defend itself and defend the world. Zelensky said, "To fly, you need 2 wings. Don't give me 1 wing and say, 'When will you fly?' I will never fly with 1 wing." Thank you very much.